Okay, so I'm delighted to have Andrew Doyle back on the show. Welcome back to the show, mate.
Lovely to see you, Geoff.
I want to talk about your new book, The End of Woke. So in a nutshell, I'm going to try and be like a proper radio guy here. I'm going to start with like the most pressing question. Do you think woke is over, Andrew Doyle?
Yeah, well, that's the question that the book seeks to answer. I think there's a kind of implied question mark in the title of that book, but I do feel that all of the signs are there that things are kind of at least drawing to a close in this phase of whatever wokeness was, right? Because you've got little signs. You've got signs like the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Pete Buttigieg taking their pronouns off their Twitter bio. But you've got the big signs as well, Donald Trump signing executive orders saying that men and women are different. The Supreme Court in the UK ruling that actually you can't change sex no matter what certificate you've got. You've got the DEI industry being completely dismantled. I mean, it's gone from all these major corporations like Amazon and Walmart and Ford and McDonald's and Zuckerberg's talking about getting rid of it. All of this sort of stuff is happening very, very quickly. It's almost like the edifice of wokeness is collapsing about as quickly as it was birthed. But then one of the smaller, sometimes the little signs tell us where we are a bit more than these big seismic changes. And I'm thinking specifically of one of the things I mentioned in the book, which I'm sure you've talked about on the show, which was that god-awful Jaguar advert.
So if people haven't seen it, I think it was last year, they did an advert for their new car, which looked like Lady Penelope's car. It's a bizarre, even just on a manufacturing level, it was a weird shout. But you mention it in the book, and it was kind of like a throwback to the sort of 2020, the sort of ubiquitous asexual-looking people. But it didn't work, did it?
Yeah, all these gender-fluid people with hammers and weird slogans like "delete ordinary" and they're all very sort of gender fluid and androgynous and the rest of it, and hermaphroditic or whatever. And then no cars. I mean, obviously it's a car advert, but there were no cars.
It's a vibe.
What was weird was that it felt dated. It's weird. Like in 2020, you would have looked at that and thought, yeah, that's what everyone's doing. That's the thing. They think they're being radical. They're not, but they think they are, and a lot of people think that's radical. And then you watch it now, and it looks like something that's been dug up, like a fossil. And that, to me, the fact that there wasn't this big outrage about it, there was a kind of, really? Is that really what we're doing still? And that, I think, is perhaps in a way that's more damning than Supreme Court judgments and the Cass Review and Donald Trump's administration and Doge and all these major sort of wrecking balls that are happening that are completely obliterating the woke movement.
Well, Indifference is the most insulting thing, is people just gone, yeah, we've seen this before. I mean, it almost felt like the end of a narrative arc all the way from that Gillette advert. Do you remember the Gillette advert where men were standing there barbecuing like sort of Stepford husbands and Gillette was saying, do better, men. And you're going, hang about. Like literally a year ago, you had models in hot pants with Gillette on their asses. And now suddenly you're the arbiters of what masculinity could and should be.
Yeah, exactly. They were hectoring their target audience. Same with Bud Light. So all of them started doing it, and they all started losing lots of money, and then they started thinking, well, what's going on there? Well, maybe people don't like being lectured at.
People don't like being told off. I mean, one of the great things about becoming a grown-up is that I always thought that would be one of the coolest elements, was that nobody could tell me what to do. And then we sort of went through a period where pretty much everybody had very strident and public views on what language you should use, how you should relate to other people, how you should feel about your own belief system.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of people resented about the woke movement when it happened, and when it happened very, very quickly, is this thing of being told what to do, being treated like a child, these assumptions being made about people that, you need to be protected from certain comedy shows or from certain books or certain films. And, we need to basically the whole woke movement, if you want to boil it down, was about infantilism, was about treating the world as if we were all kids again. And and forcing you to do things that you didn't necessarily want to do. I mean, I think about that. You remember that the Black Lives Matter protests? A lot of them went too far and turned into riots. And there was that footage of those mostly white kids in masks around a black woman at a restaurant, sitting outside dining, and they're all forcing her to put the fist up, to put the Black Lives Matter fist up, and they won't move, and they're screaming in her face, and she won't do it. She just won't do it. And she, like, people like that were so courageous, because they were pushing against this incredible kind of tsunami of demands, authoritarian demands of how you should live your life. And I think one of the interesting things that I've tried to do in the book is talk about where the woke movement has, how it's progressed and where it's gone wrong, and all of the various people that have actually said, no, we don't want to be treated like children. We don't want to go backwards. We don't want to start dividing the world up in terms of race again. We thought we'd got over all of that. And then this movement comes along and completely just unpicks all of the great achievements that we've made through decades of social liberalism and packages itself as being progressive when it's the precise opposite. And of course, I do think, and this is something I'm keen to hear your view on it, is it the case that it was always going to collapse? Because we all knew how regressive it was, no matter what the language they used. We all knew.
I think any belief system that takes like a pessimistic view of human nature will eventually come into grief, really, because people don't want to spend their whole lives thinking about themselves in a singular way. They also don't want to spend their whole lives thinking that white people are every day feeling racist things about them. White people don't want to think that they're thinking that. Now, there may be some. I've always thought there was a shred. There's some truth about unconscious bias. There may be things that we're not conscious of. But the point is if you drill it into people that every single day that's something they need to be conscious of, it's just quite a fucking depressing existence, really. It's that human beings are bad and people who are different from you don't like you, or they think of you as less than. So it was always going to rub up against. I remember I had a meeting with Owen Jones and a thing that was organised by The Guardian. We were talking about trans stuff, and I was just saying that the point is that these debates are being had within a very small percentage of the. So this was about 6 years ago. I said that once it comes into contact, once the public find out what the debate is, you're going to get a different answer. But the point is that it takes a while to get to that point. I mean, even like 4 years ago, a lot of people still didn't know what the word woke meant or what it takes time to filter through. And then what you get is like a lot of just ordinary people going, "Oh, is that what people think? Oh, that's a bit depressing." No, I don't.
Well, that's it. They fell for the lie that woke was what it used to mean. Back when Black civil rights activists were using it, that it meant just being alert to social injustice, especially racism. If that were the case, we'd all be woke, right? That's not what it meant. It became hijacked. The term was hijacked by an ideological movement that wanted to achieve equality of outcome, equity, what they call, through authoritarian means. That's what the way they wanted to do it, through censorship, through intimidation, through bullying, through a monomaniacal obsession with group identity, to the extent that you only see people through the lens of race, sex, and sexual orientation, and you forget about people as individuals. All of those things, those battles that we thought we'd won, they tried to bring all that back. And exactly what you say, people didn't know what it was that they were supporting. One of the examples I give in the book is Kathy Burke, who did a video saying, well, if you're not woke, then you're basically an idiot. You should be woke. It's great. I'm woke because I'm not a fucking twat, all the rest of it. It's exactly the same thing that Theresa May said. Theresa May said, I'm woke and proud. Theresa May is saying exactly the same as Kathy Burke. They're on completely different sides of the political spectrum, but they're basically in full agreement because they both have fallen for this linguistic trick where they think that all that woke is being nice, being kind, and it's not.
Yeah, that was always, when people sort of said, it's just about good manners, I always thought that was way too simplistic, because if it was about that, most people have good manners. It's just about not offending people. But the point is, if people's terms of offence are so fucking narrow, it's suffocating. If the terms of offence could end up being unreasonable. Well, one thing I wanted to say to you is that so these things are, unless you work in a university, by the way, let's just have thoughts and prayers for those people. Things are still pretty active there. But is there this risk where things overcorrect as well? Is like you have the kind of forces moving in one way, and then the right culturally feel like they're more in the ascendancy now. Is there the risk that some of these, as you say, reasonable things like racial and equality of sex, all that stuff, starts to go in the other direction?
Yeah. There are lots of reasonable aspects to what the woke movement, obviously I completely disapprove of their essentially authoritarian approach, but it is worth looking at the reasonable things. A reasonable question is why is it that racism still persists in society when we have legal prescriptions against it? That's one interesting question. You mentioned unconscious bias. We doubtless have a million unconscious biases going on, although it's interesting that studies have now confirmed that the more you try and implement unconscious bias training, the worse those biases become. So actually those tests and those things that they force people to do at work have actually made racism worse not better. So, for all sorts of reasons, we should be pushing back against this stuff. But there are good questions. We all don't like the idea of people being treated badly because of their immutable characteristics. No one wants that. Thankfully, we have a thing called liberalism, which pushes against it in a way that doesn't demand all of those terrible authoritarian measures that the woke were pushing. But of course, because the entire movement, one of the key arguments I'm trying to make, I suppose, is that we've misunderstood the culture war as a conflict between left and right, and it never, ever was. It was a conflict between those who believe in liberty and those who believe in authority. And so therefore, the idea that you might get a pushback is inevitable, because authoritarianism is not specific to any one political affiliation. Authoritarianism isn't just a left-wing thing. It feels at the moment like it's predominantly a left-wing thing, but you just have to read a bit of history to know that this can emerge absolutely anywhere, left and right, and it will, and it does. And by the way, if you spend a decade and a half pushing the idea that we should all think in terms of group identity and race and sexual orientation first and foremost, you can't be then surprised when ethno-nationalism is on the rise, white nationalism is on the rise. This kind of pushback we're going to get is why we're getting this phrase, the woke right, which is causing so much bother online. People are really upset about the use of this term. But if you think in terms of woke as just simply an obsession with group identity and a demand, a kind of purity spirals type demand that everyone sort of adheres to your point of view, and that we should push our own point of view through authoritarianism, through censorship, through intimidation, then woke is not a left-wing thing. It's left. It could be on the left, it could be on the right, it could be, and it does emerge on both sides. If you start thinking of woke as specifically left, you have to explain why the entire modus operandi of the woke, which is cancel culture, why is it that they've created this system where the only people who get to speak are the super rich? The people who don't have any particular the people who can't be cancelled, the Ricky Gervaises of the world, the J.K. Rowlings of the world. It's certainly the origins of the woke movement, as I traced in my last book, in The New Puritans, do come from a left-wing background, left-wing theorists and thinkers, no doubt about it. But it is nevertheless a system that does not care about the working class, that is irredeemably bourgeois and upper middle class, if anything, and orchestrates situations so that activists side with corporations against workers, and only allows you to speak if you've got sufficient money not to care. So it's not authentically left-wing in any meaningful sense. I think the phrase woke right is, I think, quite a useful way to look at what we're now seeing more and more of. I mean, I don't know about you, but online now, if that's anything to go by, which maybe it isn't, but I'm seeing such incredible overt anti-Semitism, which I think is common to wokeness on the left and the right, incredible kind of obsession with group identity, and a more fierce attempt to police other people's speech.
Well, the example that one of the examples you give is about where after the assassination attempts on Trump, and there were people that made flippant, unpleasant comments about wishing, make America aim again. There were lots of jokes. There was the band, what's the band with Jack Black in? I can't remember, but
Tenacious D.
Tenacious D. So they made a comment on stage, and these aren't comments that I would ever think to make. If someone tried to kill somebody, I would never make. Personally, I wouldn't make a joke about that, however I felt about that person. But people made these jokes, and then a lot of people on the right went after them and wanted them to get sacked and, wanted them to lose their livelihoods. So it's just the same thing, but from the other side.
Well, there was that woman in Home Depot, which is I think that's like the equivalent of, what was it, like Home Base or something in America. It's some not very glamorous shop, and the woman who worked there, she's just a cashier on a minimum wage. She'd put out some stupid tweet, "Oh, I wish the shooter had aimed better," something stupid like that, right? And this guy comes in, confronts her about it, films her on his phone. That then goes viral. She gets fired. There's all these people calling for people like that to be cancelled, but they're all right-wingers, right? I mean, the same thing happened with the guy from Tenacious D, like you say. He was blowing out a birthday cake, and he said, make sure that you aim better next time. So similar kind of joke. Lots of people making the same joke. And, I agree it's not funny. I agree it's flippant about human life, which I don't like. But, ultimately, if you're going to set a standard where cancelling people for what they say is something we don't like, right? Something we don't approve of, why does it suddenly become okay if it's our ideological opponents? That's not good. I mean, you just need consistency. It's the same thing with people saying they wanted to shut down the protests, the pro-Palestine protests. There were loads of dodgy things going on those protests, overt anti-Semitism, really grim behavior. But I still stand by the idea that offensive speech, offensive ideas, offensive protest has to be protected. We have to say, that's the world we want to live in, the world where people can express the views that they like, even the ones we don't approve of. And I do think the fact that we've seen these double standards just proves, I mean, I hate to make it say I told you so, but it proves what I've been saying all along, that it's not the case that one side is authoritarian. It's not the case that we live in a good guys versus bad guys world. And I think now that we're going into the next phase of the culture war, that woke is dying, it leaves a kind of vacuum, maybe for something, maybe for the woke to sort of reinvent themselves and come back Phoenix-like in some other horrible, grisly way. No doubt. I mean, they're already trying to do that, with all these various companies trying to pretend the Supreme Court ruling didn't happen when it comes to the Equality Act, and they're just trying to get around it and fudge it. Labour trying to bring in self-ID through the back door. All of that's still going to happen. At the same time, that the vacuum does leave a space for elements of the right. I mean, I'm not imagining this, am I? I mean, you've seen, haven't you, the extreme identity politics now being played by right wingers. Like I'm seeing
everything that I post, almost everything, there'll be a comment now underneath which tries to pin it back to some sort of like patchwork of beliefs. That, I mean, you talk about this in the book. It's like a kind of patchwork of beliefs when you have a gang that you have to always feel the same way. So if there's somebody who is an identified enemy of your gang, that everything that they say is wrong, and you can only view their ideas through the prism of your antipathy towards them, and it's just so reductive and boring. Really, it's like I want to be surprised if somebody I dislike says something good. I quite like being surprised by that. I quite like being challenged.
Well, that phrase which has been used a lot, and I've got a chapter in the book about it, the before times. That's the phrase we use about that time. You know it, where we had friends. I mean, you've managed actually to retain friends on both sides of the political spectrum. I don't know how you've done it, Geoff, but you're one of the few, because I think
agent, mate, double agent, playing both sides.
Well, the thing is, like, I don't know what your secret. Like, most of us have lost friends who perceive some kind of heresy, some kind of slight disagreement, but you found it. You've got the trick. I don't know.
Well, I suppose it's like I just quite like nuance. And the thing is, even when I'm with people that agree with me, if we start agreeing too hard, it starts pissing me off. Like if I do a tour show of people that are totally on my page, that starts to wind me up. So then I'll just start saying stuff that I think will wind them up, because I don't know if it's because I grew up in a house where my mum and dad were on different sides of the political spectrum. So I've always just thought that the interesting space is always the bit in between. One of the bits I loved reading about was about the birth of Tatania McGrath. I'm sure most people would know about her. Just remind us who Tatania was and how she came to be.
Well, she was a character I invented on Twitter back in 2018. So that's like 7 years ago now. I wanted to mock that sort of po-faced, hyper-privileged, middle-class, usually white activist who thinks they know what's best for minorities and goes out there and tries to sort of be a social justice activist, but they're really privileged and they're lecturing everyone else about their privilege. And those people I found really funny, but I also found them, they're like dangerous dogs, they're a bit scary. So I thought, if I create a character and embody that character online, Twitter, which is their battlefield,
And so she came to being when Twitter was left dominated as well, when it was dominated by progressives.
Which is why she kept getting banned because the character was mocking the ideology of the staff at Twitter. So she kept getting these bans. And I had to find sort of clever ways to avoid the ban. And they soon started working out what kind of language got you banned and how you could get away with it. And every time she got banned, her follower count expanded massively. And it was weird because loads of comedians then turned against me. They hated that I was outed. I didn't out myself when I was outed in 2019. Which coincided with Tatania's first book. So it looked like I'd done it. It looked like a publicity thing because suddenly that was news and I was being interviewed on TV and stuff about this. But I didn't plan it that way. I got outed by a journalist at the Times who did some investigative research and worked out some of the quotations that Tatania used were similar to the quotations I'd used in my articles. Really kind of clever stuff. And that was Rosamund Irwin, her name was. And anyway, so we got to this point where Tatania, because I was satirizing the woke, and they found out it was me, people got very angry at me and started saying that I was, I don't know, some kind of heretic or whatever language they want to use. So I've talked about that. And the reason I'm talking about all of that stuff that happened is that basically Tatania dragged me into the culture war. Like, this was not really, I just saw something that I thought was funny to mock. Like, I was always about mocking the people I perceived to be the bullies, the people I perceived to be in power. You know, and that's what this was. I saw this whole new movement that was bullying people, legitimizing bullying, and people weren't touching it. People were leaving it alone. Not everyone, but, you know, broadly speaking, people weren't having a go at it. So I thought I would, in the way that I had a go at the Conservative government, that I had a go at Trump through Jonathan Pye and through my stand-up and all that sort of stuff. It was just another form of power that I was mocking. And yet this, I mean, the response was, I got, you know, death threats and all sorts of weird, like, histrionic. I mean, a writer in The Guardian said that copies of Tatania's book would be passed out in hell. Like kind of really extreme responses.
Well, I remember one of the odd things that I noticed when people were pushing back against it was that people, it obviously irks people. So what they would often preface their criticism was like, there's clearly humour to be had in mocking the woke. And so they've shown themselves to be fully objective. Oh, I'm totally open to the idea that I'm being... It's just I don't like this. And any other example, I've had it myself. It's like people often say, like, oh, clearly, you know, there's a space for stand-up from the right. It's just, this just isn't funny. You know,
yeah, that's what they say.
But that's the ultimate, like, sense of humour failure is that you can't, you know, something that, like Tatania, that had a mass audience, you know, like, and the book sold amazingly well. You go, well, it obviously is fairly funny to a lot of people, but it's just because it's about you that you're getting upset.
I get that. Like, if someone's mocking your belief system, you're not going to find it funny, right? But saying that's not funny isn't good enough, right? It's an entirely wholly subjective thing. And one of the things I always got was that, it's one joke. It's just one joke. And of course, the point of the character was that she was a monomaniac. She's obsessed with one thing. She keeps focusing on this one thing again and again and again. I mean, that's why seeing it was a satirical character. It wasn't a gag-based character. It was a satirical thing. So that was a complete misunderstanding of what it was anyway. But to me, what was funniest about it was that people would fall for it, that people would believe it was real, because I tried to make it close enough that people thought it could be conceivably true. And yet I would always intimate the absurd. I would go a step too far so that, you know, it would kind of, it should be obvious, really. But then, you know, I don't tweet as her very often now. I just do it. But I did one the other day, just 2 days ago. And this went really big. It went everywhere because people were falling for it, because people were believing it. And what I did, I just tweeted as Tatania, saying all the statistics for police recorded anti-gay hate crimes by police in Pakistan, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Brunei, and all of it 0. And then America, 2,500. And she's saying, well, clearly America's the homophobic country then. Now, of course, you know, I don't have to explain the self-defeating logic of that. But I promise you, if you look at that tweet, there are thousands of responses, angry, furious responses about how stupid this woman is, how idiotic she is, that she doesn't understand, that they don't record.
Interestingly, does it now perform the opposite function where it uncovers like misogyny and people saying hateful things to her? Yeah. You know, I mean, obviously what she said is if you take it at face value, is fucking dumb. But the way that people respond to that, you do see something darker.
That was always the case with Tatania. What was fun with it is I could mock the excesses of the woke left, but also I would, as her, disagree with the woke right, the people on the right who were coming and saying, you're a stupid, dumb, fat bitch, this is why women shouldn't be allowed to vote. All this sort of stuff was exposing them as well. So I like to think the character was equal opportunities in a way.
Non-binary,
absolutely. She's non-binary, but people didn't see it that way.